Hello, second graders. We are going to continue our conversation about movement this week. Last week, we saw the work of Alexander Calder, and we were talking about mobiles and how to make three-dimensional shapes into something that was moving and fluid. Now we're going to take a look at some of my favorite pieces. We're going to take a look at some comic strips and look at how artists create movement on a flat piece of paper. How is it possible that you can draw something that looks like it's moving? Let's take a look.
In order to take a closer look at movement and how it happens on a flat piece of paper, I thought it'd be fun to take a closer look at some comic strips and how the illustrators create movement even though there's nothing that's really actually moving on the piece of paper. So here's our first one. Where would you say that the characters are moving? I noticed that there's movement on the second box and on the third, right? It looks like the little boy, Charlie Brown, and the dog, Snoopy, are toggling over the comic book. But how do we know that? How can we tell that they are moving around? What do you notice that the illustrator added to these strips to make it look like the characters are moving? What about this one? The third one. What does it look like they're doing? If we had to guess as to if they were going up and down, or do you think they're going around and around? And how can we tell? Here's another example. You might really be able to see how movement is created in this one. We have two different characters. Looks like they're little bears. And we're seeing some movement in a couple of different places. I definitely see it on the second one and the third one. And it looks like this little bear took away a sandwich and then was running away. If we take a closer look, in both this comic strip and this comic strip, there's this very interesting detail of these lines that were added. So if we look at Snoopy and Charlie Brown, there's some lines around the outside. There's some lines around the outside. And on this one, there's sort of like lines going around in circles around them to make it appear as if they were going around and around, toggling with the comic book. What kind of motion or movement do you see on this second comic strip? What do you think the lines are showing you? What about on the third one? Right? We see something similar to what was happening with the Charlie Brown comic strip. Let's take a look at one last one. This one's a Charlie Brown one again. And Charlie Brown is taking a look at a book, and we sort of see him moving many different ways in these 6 bottom boxes. We see his arm waving around, right? How did the artist manage to show us that his arm was moving around? We see him dancing with a lamp. And again, we see some interesting lines here. It makes me think if these lines are maybe showing us where the object was before. So for example, when Charlie Brown is dancing with the lamp, maybe the lamp used to be over here, and as he's swinging it around, the lines are showing us where the lamp has been. The same thing with his hand. His hand used to be up here because he's waving it up and down, and his hand used to be down there too. And it's showing us with different lines the range of movement. What do you think Charlie Brown is doing in this bottom corner? How can we tell? What were his legs doing before?
So now that we've looked at a couple cartoons or comic strips of how they add movement, I can take anything in the world and make it look like it's moving. So first things first, I'm going to write my name in the corner just in case I need the other side. And then I'm going to flip it over. I'm working with Sharpie so that you all are able to see what I'm doing on my piece of paper, but I highly recommend you start
With pencil.
I can take anything, even for example, like a marker. So I have some Crayola markers right in front of me. I'm going to go ahead and sketch out a Crayola marker. I'm going to go ahead and add a little label inside of it. And since my favorite color is red, I'm going to go ahead and write red. Now, in order to add movement to my marker, I'm going to add those repetition lines on one end, like that, and maybe over here, right? I could even do some around the side if I really wanted to. And now it gives the illusion that my marker is moving around. I could do it with a paintbrush. So for example, if I wanted a paintbrush, maybe there's a paintbrush right over here. My paintbrush is going to be so big. It's going to go right up to my marker. Kind of like that. And then I can do the same thing. Illusion that it is wiggling around. And I could keep trying this with so many different things. You could even do like a water cup, some paint splashes, people, cars, anything you want. I think I'm just going to continue to add different art supplies on here and see what I end up with.